Hey everyone, welcome to Navigate Your First Job in Creative Industries, featuring an all-star panel of recent Duke graduates. I'm Ali Shumar, Career Advisor at the Duke University Career Center and Operations Director at the Rubenstein Arts Center. Before we begin, I would like to thank tonight's amazing co-presenters, Demon Live, Duke University Career Center, The Chronicle, Duke Create, Duke in Los Angeles, Duke in New York, and Duke Arts. Please note that we are recording this Zoom session for you to stream later on Demon Live, along with dozens of Demon Live episodes, as well as on the Duke University Career Center website. We can't wait for tonight's panel, and make sure to stay tuned later when we reveal the lucky Duke student who will receive a $250 Apple gift card from the raffle we have with the Chronicle. Now, I'd like to introduce Nina Wilder, Duke Class of 2020 and Arts Administration Fellow at Duke Arts, who will be moderating tonight's panel. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you, Ali. Tonight, we will hear from our talented panel, then open up to questions from you, our audience. Please type your questions for the panelists in the Q&A specific chat. Many of tonight's questions come from students in the Studio Duke program, as well as students enrolled in Karen Price's Studies in the U.S. Culture Industries virtual class, which is usually taught as part of the Duke in Los Angeles program. But first, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists. I will introduce them briefly as their full bios are available on our episode page. Joining us tonight are Alexandra Bratton, class of 2017, coordinator of partner marketing content distribution at NBC Universal.
Hi, everyone.
Bryce Cracknell, class of 2018, Associate Impact Producer at Participant Media.
Hey, y'all, happy to be here.
Chaz Hawkins, class of 2017, Writer, Director, and Producer, featured on the Blacklist 2020.
What's up, y'all? Hope you're well.
Jesse Dembo, class of 2016, Associate Manager of Global Partnerships in Latin America at the NBA.
Thanks, Nina.
Taj Badil Abish, class of 2016, copywriter at Goodby Silverstein and Partners.
Hey, everyone.
Marielle Rodgers, class of 2018, Xbox strategy at Microsoft.
Evening, everyone.
And finally, Marina Poole, class of 2017, junior editor at MasterClass.
Hey, guys.
Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. I'm going to kick over my first question to Marina, and we're going to get right into it. It's a question that we hear a lot at Duke, especially with your job in freelancing. What are your top tips for students and alums looking to freelance?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that just to realize it exists as an option. I don't think anyone told me about freelancing while I was a student, and the thing is, you kind of have to wait until you graduate and you're in the city where you want to work, because you kind of need to just be ready to work tomorrow if someone hits you up. The most important thing, the number one thing for freelancing is your network. So I guess it can be kind of hard if you haven't had that first job, but even if you've only had internships or any kind of connections, lean on your network and ask for help. Let people know what you want to be doing and say like, hey, can you put my name out there? Like I want to start freelancing in this role. And that's how I got every single freelance job, was just by people connecting me with other people. And once you get that first job, it kind of just blossoms from there. And yeah, you just got to be genuine and connect with people and keep in touch with people and do work that you're proud of. So just the other thing I'll say is to build up your portfolio while you're still in school, because a lot of times you kind of want to, at an entry level, like say, so I'm an editor, and to get jobs as an assistant editor, I was still having to show a reel, even though I was just assisting. So I didn't really have work from like the various companies that I could say I actually cut this, but I did have stuff that I had cut from independent projects that I had done on the side or stuff from school. So really try to lean on that while you're still in school and take advantage of those opportunities to grow your portfolio and build a reel.
That's great advice. And it makes me want to go to Taj, who has also worked as a freelance artist on this panel. And so my question for you, Taj, is how does being a freelance copywriter differ from being a copywriter assigned to an agency, because you've had both jobs? And does one have advantages over the other?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, being a copywriter in an agency, you are a part of that agency, and you have, depending on the list of clients, the ability to work on different things at the same time and work on different projects at the same time. And when you're freelancing, typically you're brought in for a specific project or a specific job, which, depending on what you're into, having focus versus being able to kind of explore different parts of your mind, whether working on a sports client or like a food product at the same time works well for you, or whether you want to be more honed in on, okay, I'm working on Doritos, it's going to be the next month of like chips. And so I think those would be the kind of outstanding differences between being a copywriter in an agency setting versus being freelance. One thing Marina said that also I think is true for freelance editors is that you can, what was I going to say? Oh, freelancing, you're in charge of your schedule. So you work as much and as often as you want, versus being at an agency, you're a salaried employee, and you know there's always going to be work coming down the line. So just having that flexibility as a freelancer is something that most people consider an advantage, being able to take time off when you need it, and whatnot.
That's great advice. I think that, freelancing is often very intimidating for recent graduates. It seems somewhat inaccessible. So it's good to hear that there is possibilities for people looking to freelance, especially straight out of school. Sort of staying on the topic of your first job out of college, Marielle, this is a little broad, but I really just want to know what helped you stand out when applying to your first job. What would you say was the most standout thing for you?
Yeah, what was really important for me was I learned pretty quickly on that Microsoft was a company that cared how you think, and less if you're doing a specific function for 4 years straight or going to a specific major from a type of program or different things like that. So because of Duke's curriculum, I was actually able to take a lot of classes that combined all of my interests in behavioral economics and different things like that, and really be able to sort of craft that story and show how they all aligned and came together through the clubs and the different classes I was taking. So that was super helpful. And then a second thing for me personally was my Duke Engage experience. I was able to work in Nicaragua with the Social Entrepreneur Corps after my freshman summer. And it was a direct application that I was able to really test out my interest in business, how I wanted to combine sort of creative stuff while also learning how to work on financial side of things and really get that well-rounded experience. And it was something that as a sophomore, I was able to take and present to a program that generally mostly looks at juniors, but Duke gave me that opportunity through Duke Engage to be able to the point earlier, sort of have that backup reel of showing your experiences and showing your proof of your story. So that really helped me along the way.
Keeping going with sort of how your Duke experience helped you get to where you are now, Bryce, I would like to know, while at Duke, so you currently work at Participant Media as an impact producer, but how did you sort of realize that you were interested in storytelling and then develop those skills as a storyteller at Duke?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think I didn't know that I wanted to be a storyteller in any sort of context, probably late into my senior year. I had gone on Duke Immerse in Jordan, and the day that I was coming back from Jordan was the day that the Trump administration issued its first Muslim ban. And I'd spent the past month with a cohort of students interviewing Iraqi and Syrian refugees, and coming back to the United States, listening to how the popular media or the mainstream sources were sort of speaking to the refugee crisis in that region of the world just was very different from what I experienced both firsthand, but also what I'd heard from the folks who had actually lived that experience. And so we had essentially altered our work from conducting research through a policy lens and basically changed it into a communications campaign, both at a local level, but also at a state level. And so we did some lobbying, wrote an article for the Huffington Post, created a series of monologues that we performed in the Durham community. And it really solidified for me the extent to which policy, research, data can only do so much in very limited circumstances. And I think today, one of the last sort of outlets for which we can sort of reach people, challenge our preconceived notions of the world is often through storytelling. And so having majored in public policy and studied issues of environmental and racial justice domestically and international human rights, I kind of decided to take a leap into something that I'd previously only told friends that I would consider in another life, and that was getting into filmmaking. And I had very little understanding of what went into that other than the sort of behind the scenes that you'd see on some of my favorite films at the time, like Avatar or Star Wars, and moved to Los Angeles. And again, speak a little bit to how that came to be, but the DEMA network was super, super helpful in helping me get that first job, specifically Amy and Dave Carger. And I was able to get my foot in the door at Participant, really lean on my public policy chops while learning about the business. And so the social impact is sort of the intersection of activism and storytelling in many ways. And hopefully I can make a further jump more so onto the creative side, whether it be in writing or directing or producing. But that's the sort of long-winded way of how I arrived here and doing the work that I'm doing now.
I think taking the leap and moving to a city like Los Angeles and working in media is definitely frightening for a lot of people.
It was shocking. Yeah, I grew up in North Carolina, and so moving to the second largest city in the US still is culture shock.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes a great connection with Chaz, who is also sort of, I guess you could say, freelancing in your own way as a writer, director, producer. So there are countless paths to becoming a screenwriter, someone in production, but especially in screenwriting. What are your tips for students and alums hoping to establish themselves as screenwriters?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say, Bryce, I'm public policy too. So gang, gang.
Yeah.
Policy too, cool. But no, on that side, the best part and the best thing you can do right now is really learn how to craft and tell your own story, as Marielle was saying. That's your strongest thing. It's the only story and the story you know best at this point. And then once you can tell your own story in a million different ways, you can learn how to use pieces of that story to tell any multitude of story that you can create around that and create really cool narratives that not only are standalone in their own, but are also a piece of you. And when you're able to really share that piece of you with the world, it makes it a lot easier to show why you're doing things and why you want to have the social impact that Bryce was talking about. And I think public policy kind of drilled that into me as well. Just having a social impact bend to a lot of the stories you tell and a side of that. So I think really any writer at the heart of it is really just telling their own story over and over and over again in so many different paths. And I really think that's the major key that you can be doing right now and at any point in time.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. You always say write what you know. So that's at least a good starting point. Kind of going to the East Coast, Alexandra, you work for NBC Universal and you started out in the page program. And I think a lot of people maybe dream of that, but are intimidated by that. And so I'm interested in hearing about how you first connected with NBC Universal, and if you recommend applying for the page program to get your foot in the door. And if so, what are your top tips for applying?
Yeah, so I had always been interested in NBC Universal, and I think Amy definitely spurred that as well. And I first learned about it through just reaching out to alumni at NBC Universal and wanted to learn more about like entry-level jobs. And they were like, oh, the page program is a great kind of starting point at NBC. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a postgraduate program at NBCU where you get a rotation in production, in marketing, and in business. So it's for people that are really interested in media, but like not quite sure where they want to land. And that definitely resonated with me. And even if you kind of do have an idea of where you want to go, I would still highly suggest it if you're interested in NBCU, just because they do hire from within the page program a lot. 100% pretty much of pages are offered a job somewhere if they want it. So I would definitely suggest that, and it exposes you to so many jobs that you didn't know existed. Like where I'm at now is content distribution is where I had a rotation, was like, I don't know what this is, but let's try it out. And I ended up really liking it. And for tips, it's a really long application process, which I think is partially why it's like so intimidating, and some people just don't want to go through that. But it starts with a written application, and for that, I would just suggest showcasing your personality and kind of demonstrating your interest in the media landscape overall. They're not looking for people that want just one thing because it is a rotational program. And then like a month after that is a video interview, which isn't with another person on the other side. I think it's so they can remove bias and watch them all at the same time. So questions pop up and you answer them. And advice for that, I would say, pulling as many questions from like Glassdoor about the page program or anywhere online, and just writing them all down. I would stay away from questions before like 2015 because that's when they changed the program. So there are some really technical ones you'll find, like pitch NBCU to me, or kind of more complex questions that like I wouldn't say any of us are like what is NBCU's weakest property? It's more behavioral. So I would pull all the behavioral questions and then practice in photo booth so you can watch yourself back and see if you're using filler words, and just get comfortable with the questions and comfortable seeing yourself and talking to yourself on the camera, because you only see yourself. And then a couple weeks after that, I think it's virtual now, but when I did it, it was in person, and you go to 30 Rock and you have a group interview, a group with other like 7 to 9 potential page program candidates. So it's a group interview, a group activity, a one-on-one interview, and a presentation. So for those, I would just say like the group activity, and this goes for any job opportunity where you're doing group activity, if there's a time limit, volunteer to be the timekeeper. It's a great way to kind of take initiative, but relieve the pressure of like having to have the best idea or something like that. And in all of the group activities, just they're looking for team players, so nodding along to people's answers and building off of people and supporting the people that you're with is definitely something they're looking for. So I think that answers everything.
No, I think, yeah, I was kind of guessing it was intense, but it definitely does sound pretty intense. But yeah, that's all to say, maybe more worthwhile once you get it. So thank you for all of that very helpful information. I want to ask Jesse, you also did a rotation program at the NBA. So while you were in the NBA associate program on rotation through various NBA departments, how did you try to maximize your skills and your professional development?
Yeah, it's a great question. Similar to sort of what Chaz said, Being a public policy major helped me in so many more ways than I thought. Obviously I didn't go to Capitol Hill, which is what I think someone from the outside might take a look at a pub pol major and say, oh, of course you want to go into politics or you want to work at a startup. But the way I saw it, and to Chaz's point about sort of crafting a narrative for yourself and your own journey, is if you are a pub pol major, whether you know it or not, you're a problem solver. And so that's sort of how I tackled each individual rotation was, do I have experience in biz dev? No. Do I have experience project management? No. But what could I do with the skill sets that I gained through my public policy major? And it was so much more than I thought. So you look at all the individual classes, you're learning econ, not just micro and the math behind it, but macro. So thinking big picture, whether you're tackling a problem at work or you have to get a proposal passed, you're not just worried about, all right, what are the details? Take a step back, look at the bigger picture. So you learn that in econ. You learn about ethics. That comes huge into play in the workforce, especially at a big organization like the NBA. You're constantly thinking about, the classic dilemma of, all right, we need to make more money, but we also need to do the right thing. And I don't need to go into examples there, but I'm sure you could think of some on your own. If you keep going, you get technical with stuff like statistics, or probably the biggest skill that I learned at Duke was how to write. And if you can write a memo, you can write in any field you want, because half of my job, probably more than half, is crafting well-written, succinct emails. It sounds old school, it sounds dumb, but it's the way we communicate. And thank goodness for Zoom, because now you can actually speak to someone. But before that, a lot of, getting a deal done, communicating, even internally, you'd want to just walk upstairs and go to the person's desk, but you had to write an email first. So getting your message across and learning how to, effectively communicate your points, all of that came from the pub pol major. And I didn't realize it until I went through 4 different departments at the NBA, doing 4 entirely different things and realizing, you know what, I can do this. I think I went on a tangent there, but hopefully that answers your question.
No, that's great. I think we should all be pub pol majors, or we all should have been pub pol majors. Well, so we've heard initially from every, well, I'm not knocking out Duke English. I represent English. But I think we've heard from every panelist so far initially, but now I'd like to go through and do some sort of rapid fire questions and hear from every panelist on a couple questions. So to start us off, and I'm going to ask you to do this in 1 sentence or less, the least challenging thing ever. 1 sentence or less, what's the best career advice you've ever received? Think about it. And I'm going to ask Alexandra to start us off.
Sorry, finding the mute button. I think for me, someone just said to me, we have so much pressure to find your passion, and it's okay if you don't know what that is, and just find something that you're good at and you enjoy doing every day, and that will make you happy as well. So I think just relieving that pressure.
Bryce?
Don't burn bridges, build them.
Beautiful. Chaz?
Sort of on that same note, be easy. Always come at everything with a positive mindset and a chill attitude.
Jesse?
Not to freak anyone out here, but someone told me this once and I'll never forget it. Think about how you would want someone to talk about you after you've left a room. Not just your friends, but in the work setting. If you leave a meeting, what are they going to say about you? Always be yourself and always keep that in mind.
Taj?
For me, the best advice is something you already know. You just need to hear it from someone else. So that is to say, trust yourself.
It's very insightful. I like that. Marielle?
When you're asking for help, don't just bring your questions, but bring your solutions as well, and really just show how you've thought through it and get that perspective from there.
Finally, Marina.
Amy actually gave me this advice. She told me that she got her first job at the Today Show by literally showing up and introducing herself. And I thought that sounded crazy and scary, but then when I came out to San Francisco, I was just like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna do it. And I made a lot of connections that way. I actually got my first freelance gig that way.
That's great. This
So do
also
that.
this elusive Amy that keeps being referenced. If you're here and you do not know by now, that is Amy, who works with me at Duke Arts. Okay, that went really well. I'm gonna ask you a couple more. So here's my next one. Is there anything you wish you had done at Duke to better prepare for your life post Duke? So what do you wish you had done that you hadn't done? Hindsight's 2020. And I'm going to ask Alexandra to start us off again.
I think just like networking with more people and learning about more jobs while I was actually at Duke and taking advantage of the alumni network more.
Bryce?
I don't know if I'd do anything differently, but if I had more time, actually, maybe I wouldn't have been a public policy major, but for different reasons that we could get into, I would just generally say, I do miss the classroom a lot, and to study what you're interested in. I think if you, regardless of what you major in, as long as you're sort of passionate about it and interested in it and want to sort of are curious about it, like you can really get into just about any industry. And I think that really applies to this industry because you're just learning how to think and think critically.
Yeah, just to pop in and give my 2 cents, that would be mine as well. I wish I would have paid more attention in my classes. They're really interesting and helpful. Chaz.
I guess not to also take a dump on public policy, but I wish I had have started theater studies a bit earlier and access that creative side earlier in my creativity, because like Bryce, I came into writing my senior year as I was leaving, and it would have been great if I had at least a year to really study it and get decent at it, or at least a control over it before leaving.
Jesse.
I completely agree with what everyone said so far. I would say 2 additional things. One, really emphasize, take the classes you're interested in, once you get all the requirements out of the way, because you don't want to have those doubts. You don't want to have, like, the amount of times I've said, oh, if I'd done things differently, I probably would have done this. Don't do that. You're at Duke, you've all the resources in front of you. So to that end, to prepare you, I would also say, forget about the grades. First, I was the same way. I was focused on, all right, if it's not a requirement, how can I get through this credit? There are certain classes you should take that'll set you up for success. One of those, anything with Excel. I wish I'd taken more classes to just learn computer software, because I guarantee learning on the job is a lot harder. So take the time at Duke to study up on your software, whether it's in film or in numbers in Excel or PowerPoint, stuff that sounds basic, but you're going to have to use every single day.
Taj.
For me, I wish I would have collaborated with more of my co-students at the time. Duke is an amazing place and everyone is so talented, just like in an agency, and people have so many skills. So I wish I would have worked with more people and just created more stuff, because the resources are there.
Marielle.
I honestly think I should reiterate the Excel thing and learning some of the software programs. I mean, you can learn it on the job and you do, but it definitely would have made that first year transition a little bit smoother if I had been explored that a little more deeply during my time at Duke.
And finally, Marina.
Yeah, kind of to echo what a lot of you guys are saying. It's not just Excel, it's Photoshop, it's Illustrator, it's like whatever creative field you envision for yourself, like know those skills, because we do have classes and resources available at Duke. And while you're in those classes, I don't know if any of you guys are like this, but I was super intimidated by how kind of talented and advanced some of my peers were in like certain film classes that I took, that I felt like I was new to this, and I looked at them and I was like, what, like, how you guys, like, this is insane. And it kind of scared me, and it kind of made me think like, oh, I'm not necessarily like the right person for this. But once I graduated, I realized that I was like, had so much more experience than a lot of people. So just like ask, you know, just like get help if you need it, make work that you're proud of while you're in school.
That's lovely. I think that, yeah, as I've graduated, what I've learned most is I look back and I'm like, oh, there's a million things I coulda, shoulda, woulda done. And if I can at least make it count by telling current undergrads to go do it, then it's worthwhile. Okay, this is good. I like everyone sort of building on each other. So I'm going to ask one more round circle question. Everyone here works in some capacity in a creative industry. And so we know that there are uncertain timelines when you are applying to jobs. If you are even applying, if you're freelancing, that it's sort of just diving in head first. And there's also social pressures associated with choosing to pursue a career in creative industries. You know, we usually don't have recruiters or that sort of, like I said, timeline that other careers might have. So, and maybe this is sort of a wellness thing, but if you could share one tip that helped you navigate the uncertainty, the wacky timelines, the pressure, etc. If you had one tip, what would it be for handling that? And once again, I'm going to start off with Alexandra.
Yeah, I would just say reframing, since timelines are longer, not thinking of it as like a failure to graduate without a job, because most people won't even consider you until you've already graduated. And for the social part, no one remembers when you started your job, whether it was in August or you waited until October. Like, you might be like, everyone's in jobs and they think I'm like such, like, no one remembers when you started your job. So
thank God for that. Bryce.
Similarly, I think a lot of your peers will probably, or if you are in this senior class, a lot of your peers may have jobs already. And not to be intimidated by that. I didn't get my job until August after graduation. And so I think that was 3 months later. And I think something that was interesting about the industry, particularly in LA and in film and entertainment in particular, is that folks really don't care where you came from or what sort of credentials that you have. And it's all about sort of putting your time in and working your way up, particularly in corporate settings. And that for me was really challenging for a number of reasons. Speaking mostly to the financial reason is that they don't pay assistants very much at all. And some folks may have to get a couple of jobs or have additional assistance from other funding, which I didn't have. And so there are a number of sort of pressures there to navigate. I think the advice that I would give is that if you're interested in being a sort of creative, is to make things, find things to make with peers. There's money out there to grab. Even as an alumnus, you can get money from the university in certain contexts and settings, but really be scrappy in terms of how you sort of work that creative muscle, regardless of what you're doing during the day, finding the time to make things for yourself. And if you get to the point, and hopefully folks do get to the point where the thing that you're making money doing is also the thing that you like to do and is the thing that you're doing on the side, that's fantastic. But until then, make sure that you're financially sustained, so that way you can do the creative things that you want to do.
Wonderful. Chaz.
Yeah, not just to echo Bryce a little bit there. It's like when you're in those hard times, remember how much you love what you're doing too. It's like, don't forget about that, even when times are good and times are bad. And then when it comes to actually getting the jobs and working each job, make sure to take advantage of each little and every opportunity you get, because in this industry, you never know who you're going to meet and at what time. This industry is so small, even though it looks so huge, it's so much tinier when you're actually inside of it and you realize, oh, wait, you know this person? And you can just be working a small little opportunity, just writing a small short script for someone that ends up building into a feature that gets funded. And then you get paid for all of those types of things. So just take advantage of any and every opportunity that comes your way. And just make sure to bring everything with that same love that you have at all creative assets.
That's great. Jesse, tips for uncertainty and social pressures.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like we're all pretty similar. It's how we all ended up at Duke. But what I would say is there's a lot of pressure to feel like you have it all figured out when you graduate, to graduate and say, I got the dream job, I'm doing what I want to do. But I'll tell you, more likely than not, that first job will not be your last job. You're going to go through a lot of different jobs, maybe different careers, maybe switch entirely. So don't just put so much pressure on where you end up, right? What company it is, what the name is. Focus on what you're doing. Focus on the skills that you're getting. If it's a job that allows you to learn, that's all you need, because from there you can craft, again, going back to the narrative, craft the narrative that you want for yourself and take bits and pieces from each experience. Don't worry so much about the name of where you're starting, because I guarantee that's probably going to change after a couple of years anyway.
Taj.
Just speaking on the timeline piece, in the creative industry, you're going to have to deal with deadlines and timelines, and it can get crazy sometimes. And you'll hear the term thrown out like, oh, this is an emergency. Well, at the end of the day, it's not. Like, there's a reason we're creatives. We don't work in emergency rooms, so it's not life or death at the end of the day. So conversely on that, like, take care of yourself. Like, things aren't emergencies. No one is going to perish as a result of you not being able to send something at 8 p.m. at night always. If you can get it done earlier, cool, but definitely just try and take care of yourself, because we didn't choose the medical school route for a reason.
There are no emergencies in the arts. Marielle.
Yeah, I would just say know your why and remember sort of the reasoning behind why this is the area you want to be in, compared to a lot of these industries that tend to have way earlier recruiting timelines. I worked in the career center, and we would have a lot of really stressed out seniors every year come in and sort of freak out. And then when you ask them, like, do you even want to be doing consulting or banking or something? They clearly had no interest in it, but the fact that these timelines are so different and overlapping is just always go back to that why and be like, no, the things I want to do, they're just going to operate differently, and that's fine. But it is sort of hard to separate those when you have friends and everyone else with such varied interests at school.
And Marina, close us out on this question.
Yeah. Well, to the freelancing thing, it can seem really uncertain, but it's actually a lot of times a lot easier to get work as a freelancer, because they're not committing to you for like years and years. And, it's like you're signing on for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it is. And I didn't have to submit an application or show my resume to anyone a single time until my current position, which is a staff position. But so yeah, I guess just to kind of what Chaz was saying, take every opportunity that comes your way. If it I just remembered another good piece of advice that I got. Try to think of it as a triangle. There's like three things. There's, are you doing it for the money? Are you doing it for the people? You're going to really enjoy making these connections or working with these people, or the creative. And it's the creative is something that really calls to you. So you need to always try to fulfill at least two of these three things. Maybe right out of school, it might just be one, but try to aim for two. You're probably not going to get all three right off the bat. And if you can't satisfy the money aspect of it, live at home if you can, get a second job if you can, do whatever you need to do to support that the creative and the network, because those are going to serve you in the end more than the immediate payoff will.
That's great. I feel like I keep saying that's great advice, but y'all have such great advice. Again, I think for a lot of people, and I was here a little over a year ago, it's very daunting to think about pursuing a career in a creative industry. You know, people tell you you're not going to make any money. People tell you you are going to be stressed all the time, et cetera, et cetera. So it's nice to know you guys have at least somewhat mastered, or you have good advice on how to deal with all of that. So I'm going to use the rest of our time to go back to some individual questions, and I'm going to go to Marielle. You touched on this briefly beforehand, but you have an economics degree in decision sciences, which I think is just fascinating. And so I'm curious as to how that intersects with your current role as a market strategist for Xbox.
Yeah, so luckily enough for me, the ability to think at both a macro and a micro level has been really instrumental in my time working as strategy for Xbox. We work not only across the organization with a bunch of senior leaders to try to figure out what do we want to do as a whole brand, as a company, where are we trying to look now, a few years out, how does this all work together? But we also have a lot of different products now that are subscriptions or hardware consoles or cloud streaming, and they all have their own special needs and interests and questions and things that are sort of making them tick every day. And you have to be able to get really deep and really gritty really quickly on super nuanced topics. So being able to sort of flip between the spectrum of things has been super useful in understanding those. And then sort of as we think about these opportunities, there's both the how does this fit us creatively, how does this add to our story, but there's also the financial side. If we want to acquire a company, it might look great on paper, but then we realize like there's no way to make this work. So understanding from econ how to think about model building and how to think about all the different components that go into that have been really helpful pieces for my current role.
Awesome. And I'm also sort of interested in these intersections between what we studied and what we end up working in. So I want to go to Chaz, and I am really curious to hear your answer on this. You pursued an MFA program at Loyola Marymount, and how did that help you prepare for your career as a writer? Do you think it's essential for a writer to get an MFA or no?
I think so. There are like two schools of thought. I think for me, it was essential because at Duke, I wasn't studying writing in any way, shape, or form. I knew nothing about the craft. I just knew that I liked writing. And in fact, for my application, and this goes back to studying like the tools of your craft, I didn't even know the final draft program existed when it came to writing scripts. So I was writing everything on Microsoft Word and tabbing over and spending like an extra 6-7 hours working to make a script look like a script when there was technology out there that did it for me. I didn't know about that till I got to grad school. So for me, grad school was essential because I just didn't study writing when I was coming out. That being said, if you studied writing when you're coming out, I don't think it's as essential. I think you can be able, if you're able to tell stories at that point, it's just you amassing an amount of experiences and being able to tell those experiences as well as you can and finding that networking element and opportunities to do that. Grad school's a hyper-focused bastion for that and can give you time to build that portfolio, to build that network in a small space. But not all of these people, for example, in my grad school, my MFA program, not all of these people end up actually doing what we all want to do, even at the MFA level. So it's like, it's just more helpful to get out in the world and start the networking process and get involved in that. Go PA on someone's set, go work as a page like Alexandra went into. Like, find ways that are even craftier to just be around film, and you can find ways to write for it after that.
That's great. Yeah, I do think it's a sort of, and it can be a divisive school of thought. Some people are like, no, you do not need an MFA if you're a writer. It's like a God-given talent. And some people see
it was helpful. It was helpful.
Very beneficial. Yeah. Yeah. So that's great to hear. And I guess it's just sort of to the person, but it's nice to hear that it was helpful. Bryce, I would like to ask you a bit about your current job. I think it's a very fascinating intersection of what you studied at Duke and what you're interested in with storytelling. So can you just tell us what your role is as social impact producer at Participant Media, and how does that fit into the overall filmmaking process there?
Yeah, so Participant is unique in some ways, but essentially what they do is that they're a production company and that they're a financier. And so for those that are familiar with the filmmaking process, forgive me. For those that aren't, hopefully this is somewhat helpful, but we essentially get involved with projects either super early on in development, or we buy a project after it's essentially been made. And so for documentaries, for instance, we purchased a documentary from Sundance. I had to make sure this has been announced. It has called Flee, that had already been made, and we're going to co-distribute it with a company called Neon. And so in that process, the film has already been made by the artist, and now we're just distributing it in theaters later this year, and eventually it'll live on a streaming platform. And in that context, someone like myself who works in social impact will come in to sort of inform the deal to make sure that this fits our sort of values and narrative with regards to how we think about impact in the world, and that the film can reach different audiences and certainly influence social change in some way, shape, or form. But the longer version of that is that we might get involved with the project much earlier on, and essentially see it from an idea, whether it's a article, a book, or even just an idea someone has, bring the different sort of folks together, whether it be a writer and a director and producers, and really just build the craft from there, work on it script to script to script. And we eventually reach a stage where we consider greenlighting it and actually funding it entirely to go ahead and make it. In that process, someone like myself, again, is sort of brought in to sort of give that weight as to whether it would have that social impact. And assuming that it does, the film or the television show will go ahead and get made. And we come in later, however many years or months after, to begin thinking about what does a campaign look like. We work closely with the distributor and the marketing team to think about what audiences will it reach, what is the sort of state of play with movements that might touch on these issues, and how will it sort of resonate with folks, and where can we sort of push the envelope forward when it comes to that issue. And so for something like Just Mercy or When They See Us, those are involved in police reform, police accountability, criminal justice reform, reimagining the criminal justice system more broadly. And we work closely with organizations like the Equal Justice Initiative and a number of others, Color of Change, to think about how we can look at prosecution differently, and more specifically reform how the justice system is in of itself. And narrative change is, of course, a major part of that. And so what we sort of do is that we bring audiences together, whether it's the film going audience or activists and folks, policymakers, people who do the work full time, and use the film to either broaden that coalition or use the sort of communications around the film to push the issue. And so even more recently, Judas and the Black Messiah just came out on Warner Brothers or HBO Max. And the large part of that campaign is really changing how we think about the Black Panther Party, their role in the United States, and how influential they were into making sure that folks' basic needs are met from a sort of anti-poverty perspective. And so depending on the film, depending on the issue, depending on who's involved, we'll sort of build a campaign from there, working closely with the filmmakers, those who are marketing and those who are distributing the film.
That's amazing. I think it's really important now more than ever to, let it be understood that art does not exist in a vacuum, that it is very much a part of our social justice movements in this country. It is very much a part of current events, and that you can have those intersections in your creative work. I think it's great. I'm curious, so this is an audience question. Has anyone on the panel ever conducted an informational interview? Not you being the one who's talking to someone, but someone contacted you for an informational interview. Has that ever happened to anyone here? Taj, yeah?
Yeah, since,
I was going to say the question is,
that?
Yeah, I was going to say the question is how the student wants to know how they can set themselves apart in an informational interview, and makes them want you to possibly refer them to your company or where you're working.
Yeah, two examples come to mind of people who have had reach out to me, and that led to a chat that then led to an interview and a chat down the road. The first thing I would say is be personable within reason. I think there's a fine line between professionalism and being like human and sounding human. So one example, I had a guy reach out to me on LinkedIn. He expressed that he had admired a piece of work that I had worked on, and identified some common interests, and was just like, I'd love to just like have a conversation with you, and here's my number if you're interested. It was like the perfect level of like formal, like you've clearly like looked into who I was, but also like you're not treating this solely as a transaction. It came across human, and we later had a phone call. He was a super dope guy. And that was a connection I think was valuable later on to him. And then the second example is just kind of don't be afraid to ask. When you're reaching out to people, have what you want to know kind of in mind. I think someone earlier mentioned like kind of know what you're asking someone for, because if people just reach out to you and just send a LinkedIn connection, it's like, okay, I don't know you, I don't know what we have in common, and I don't know how I can help you. So be very upfront and clear on kind of what you're looking for advice on, what you want to hear about, so on and so forth. I think that goes a long way.
That's great. Marina, did you say you had also had someone contact you before?
I did recently, and it was kind of a strange experience for sort of like the opposite reasons that you said, Taj, because I sort of found myself in a situation where I wanted to help and I was like excited to share information, but he didn't really know what he wanted. So it made it hard to help. So I totally like everything you said, Taj, is advice to follow.
Does anyone else, I think I saw a few other hands, does anyone else have any other things to add about that? How can you make yourself stand out when you're talking to?
I've had a mix through either LinkedIn or Duke alumni or different clubs. And I think the biggest thing is being genuine. I think it's totally fine for someone to say, I'm actually just trying to learn at this point. I don't really even know what your role is, but I really want to find out. And doing a bit of that back work, to Taj's point, is sort of understanding like, this is what I know and here's what I want to get to. And is there anything in the inner realm where like I can learn more, find out things out? I've had people come to me that way, and you have conversations, and honestly sometimes they never even asked for a referral, and I did it on the back end on my own because I could just sense that it was something that they were really caring about. And then sometimes people come across super abrasive, super upfront, but they can't actually explain or show why they're looking for your help or guidance in any way. So I think it's been through a mix of channels, but really just those who come and are genuinely wanting to learn. I've never had peers or friends not want to have these conversations with people. So just putting your foot out there and just getting these conversations in and learning is a great start in its own.
That's, I think, a perfect place to end this panel. I would like to give a humongous thank you to all of our panelists for this conversation. I have no doubts that it was incredibly helpful for students and alums hoping to break into creative industries. Y'all are amazing. I'm so happy that Zoom exists so I can make this happen. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And
thanks for having us.
now, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now it's time to announce the winner of our raffle in collaboration with the Duke Chronicle, a newspaper that I used to write for. Drum roll, please, because the lucky winner of a $250 Apple gift card is Arden Schraff. Congratulations, Duke class of 2021. You won a gift card. The Chronicle will be in touch via email, so you may receive your fabulous prize. Congrats. Before we wrap, we would also like to extend our gratitude to the dozens and dozens of collaborators across Duke's campus who helped us spread the word about tonight's events. Y'all made it happen. You can stream tonight's conversation along with many more episodes of Demon Live on arts.duke.edu/demon. Also, be sure to check out Duke University Career Center resources at studentaffairs.duke.edu/career. And make sure to check out Career Center events such as Sophomore Conversations at careerconnections.duke.edu. I'm going to leave you with more music from Duke's Vice Provost for the Arts, John Brown. I thank you so much for joining us tonight. Until we meet again, stay safe and be well. Thank you.